Garane, member for Lagderaa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the President's address. From the onset, I wish to state that I like to recommend or commend the President's speech for his boldness, for his honesty in regards to the current situation of the country. Mr. Speaker, you will realize that the presidents of this nation, holding the highest office in the land, was bold enough to ask for forgiveness from the Kenyan people. He is doing so because in one way or the other, during his campaign period, he surely knows that he has wronged someone in one way or the other. That was statesmanship. That shows the desire and the goodwill he has for this country. Mr. Speaker, in his speech, the president passionately talks about the Big Four agenda. The president knows that his legacy is pegged on the success of the Big Four agenda in this country. When he talks about the empowerment of the National Administrative Service, the president cares so much about the security of this nation. He knows that by empowering the National Police and the National Administrative Service, this country will be at peace. The president's speech also touched on regional stability. He talks so much about the instability in Somalia because Kenya is a regional leader when it comes to peacekeeping. Mr. Speaker, you know that our forces, our men in blue, our men and women in uniform serve every part of this world. They have been deployed in Sierra Leone, they have been deployed in Sudan, they have been deployed in many parts of this country, in this continent. They have been deployed in many parts of this continent. You realize that the president is so passionate about motivating our KDF by visiting them in Mogadishu. This shows that the president is so much concerned about regional stability in this region. My biggest disappointment was the president did not talk about the measures the government has taken or is taking to mitigate these ravaging floods in this country. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, Gurufa Primary School in my constituency will remain closed because the whole village was displaced. The school compound was submerged with water. Students cannot go back. They cannot go back to learning. Now we are thinking of doing a makeshift structures 20 kilometers away from where they have been displaced. It's therefore very unfortunate that the president did not touch on what measures he is going to do or the government is doing to mitigate all these measures. That is my biggest disappointment. Mr. Speaker, let me also say something about the Equalization Fund. I think what members of this Honorable House needs to understand is that we need to consider the spirit of the Constitution rather than we need to consider the letter of the Constitution rather than the spirit of the Constitution. When the framers of this Constitution were coming up with marginalization areas, there were areas that were historically marginalized. If you compare locations, sublocations in lagderaa to sublocations in other parts of this country, Mr. Speaker, that is not comparable. That is the poorest sublocation in Mount Kenya or in Western. You know, it's even far much better than the richest sublocation in lagderaa. It's therefore very unfortunate to talk about areas. We need to talk about locations. We need to talk about marginalized areas. That's what we need to talk about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg for one more minute. I need to go back to the ravaging floods. What has happened is that whenever it rains very heavily, the communities living downstream in the Tana always face the greatest, problem in these floods.